something had sagged. But what had happened was they had cut the end of a big heavy joist on the other end of the house. And now that joist was cantilevering off of a beam and lifting this part of the staircase.
It was like a big seesaw. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, a regular discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Editorial Director Brian Pontalillo.
Good morning, everyone.
Digital Brand Manager Rob Watzak.
Hey there.
And our producer Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
You can please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it was a pleasure to see you gentlemen this morning. Thanks for being here.
Sure. Our pleasure, too. Well, at least mine.
See, you caught me in mid-remodel this week, Rob. I decided to, since the barn was largely finished, I decided to tear it all apart again because that's just what I do. But so, what'd you think? Was it what you expected? Was it a clean work site? Was it a disaster?
Yeah, your work sites are always clean, Patrick. You're a very meticulous person.
I decided recently that I absolutely hate pegboard, and you tried to get me to articulate what it is, and I don't know if I'd really thought about it, but I frankly hate the way it looks. Do either of you have strong aversion to pegboard?
Well, what I said to you was, I feel like pegboard is just a sign of a lack of commitment. Like, it's like, you go to a nice woodworker's shop and there's all these beautifully built cabinets that are custom fit to every single tool that hangs on the wall. So you can never get a new tool or change the layout of your tools, of course, but
I asked Liam what he thought about it, and he said it kind of sent this like kind of amateur DIY message, which is, something I just can't have. So it's got to go. All of it. It's the first thing I've put out in the driveway as free, and it didn't go. And like apparently no one else wants pegboard. So I find that kind of interesting.
Oh, I'm sure if you gave it enough time, it would have been gone.
Well, the problem then is it got rained on, which I can tell you, pegboard does not stand up to rain very well. What have you been doing, Rob?
I haven't really done much since the last time we spoke. I did get a little more progress on my bike tractor thing. I got the gears and the brakes running pretty well on it. I was actually shocked at how simple the drivetrain is going together on that thing, which means the steering's probably going to be really a bear to get working. But
I surprised Brian kind of, he just like took this matter of factly, like people build a bike tractor all the time. What do you think about this, Brian? Have you heard about this project?
Well, I haven't heard about this project, but I know Rob. And so I was unfazed, and I did have a visual as soon as he said it. So I'm looking forward to seeing the finished product.
Yeah, I was going to share more pictures of it, but I kind of feel like it just looks like a pile of parts right now. And I'm going to paint it up nice. We were having a debate about which color would be ideal, and I think I'm going with what is it? Is it Massey Ferguson that had an orange? It's like a burnt orange, like back in the 40s and 50s. That's probably what I'll go with. Yeah.
Flames?
No, just plain up, straight up orange and black.
Nice Formula One body, or
I might put an old like 50s Jeep grill on it. We'll see about that. But.
So, what is the ultimate goal with this vehicle? What do you intend to do with this tractor? Is it just a novelty, or are you actually going to put attachments on?
It's going to be completely functional. I mean,
I'll be the judge of that.
Yeah, let's just wait and see. There's going to be a bunch. I was looking at a little crane attachment for it the other day on Facebook Marketplace, but I'll probably end up fabricating all the parts myself.
Okay, well, keep us posted. Jeff, what have you been doing?
Not a whole lot. I wound up helping my wife work on something over the weekend, so I didn't really get much time doing anything other than mowing the lawn and stuff. So,
how about you, Brian? Got any projects?
No, but I have happily, since I haven't had, as most people who listen to the podcast regularly know, I've been an apartment dweller for about 2.5 years now. And so I've had minimal projects, but I'm going to be around some friends this summer. And so I've already committed myself to helping with lots of stuff. And
Like
I can't
what?
wait to, my brother-in-law is doing complete remodel of a house and needs someone to tackle some exterior painting. So I said, I'll be there.
Awesome.
And I ran into a friend yesterday who needs a siding crew and needs to put together a siding crew. And I just said, count me in. I'm there.
I'm a
So,
little worried you're going to leave your editorial director's position and go be a siding mechanic and leave us in the lurch.
well, I might skip out on a few days. I don't know if I'll leave completely, but if you're looking, if you can't find me, you can guess that I'll be on some pump jacks.
That sounds pretty fun, man. That's good work because you're out in this outside. It goes fast, right?
Yeah, and I also, both of these people have helped me with stuff in the past, and so to be able to return when I was remodeling my house, so to be able to return the favor is a nice thing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Do you get scared on pump jacks? Are these the good ones, the aluminum ones, or are these the wood 2x4 deal?
I don't know what the setup will look like yet. I won't know till I get there, but Chris is pretty meticulous person and pretty safety oriented. So I have a feeling it'll be safe. And I have to always check myself when I'm working in the air because I tend to start off very cautious and a little nervous on ladders, on pump jacks, on roofs, and I tend to get really complacent by the end of the day. And I don't know if maybe that's like if a lot of people go through that kind of progression, but I have to as the day goes on, I have to almost get more careful.
Do you have to get
because no, I don't.
Okay.
But yeah, as the day goes on, I have to get more careful. I have to remind myself as I get comfortable up in the air that it's just as dangerous as when I started.
Well, I think that's good you recognize that about yourself. I think a lot of folks get sloppy but don't realize it, right?
Yeah.
Until you're lying on the ground.
Yeah.
So I've been asking the folks in our world, how things are going with regard to getting material and appliances and equipment generally. And so I asked Andrew Steele, who's a builder in Asheville, North Carolina area, who I'm working on a feature article with, if he's had any trouble. And he wrote back, I'm waiting 12 plus weeks for Anderson windows, 12 weeks for domestic semi-custom cabinets. Drywall bucket mud is scarce. I have a dishwasher that is back ordered until Thanksgiving. I was at my local hardwood/plywood dealer a few weeks ago. 3/4 inch Baltic birch is less than subfloor from the box store. There was a gentleman there buying a bunch for a screen porch he was building. Nothing like covering Baltic birch with indoor-outdoor carpet. That was hilarious. I wrote back and told him he should buy what remained for his own projects, right?
Yeah, for sure. I got piles of plywood scraps in my basement that I was getting ready to just throw to the dumpster, and I'm like, maybe I should be keeping these things.
I think you should put them up on Facebook Marketplace. You could pay for a, car down payment or something.
Well, I was on a friend's job site yesterday, and he had all these neatly stacked scraps along one wall, and he had demoed a whole bunch of cabinetry, and he said, maybe maybe this is the way I should have been working all along for other reasons, but the price of things right now has pushed me to think about the pieces of blocking I'm going to need to put in these walls, and to just find it within all these scraps from this cabinetry that I had to pull out.
I can tell you, if you have that stuff around, you find a use for it amazingly, right? Even stuff you think is completely garbage, somehow it comes in handy at some point.
I'll tell you, I hate throwing stuff out. I wish I had a barn double the size because I'm a scavenger and I collect lots of stuff to make. I had like a dozen bikes lying around and I cut up to make this tractor thingy. But I built a headboard out of pieces of the old pergola that fell down in my back patio. And every single time I throw out something, I'm like, a week later, I need it for some project.
That's the way it goes. Our friend Dan Colbert wrote in in regard to our discussion of tilt-turn windows in episode 360, he says, we find a lot of clients mostly use the tilt function. It doesn't intrude much on the living space, and even better, it sheds water. He had some thoughts on our discussion of proper tarping, too. He says, we get a piece of EPDM if we're taking it down to the floor. You run it over the edge, frame the exterior walls over it, and then you cut it out when dried in. We also did this when we had a new house with exposed beams and the finished 2x tongue and groove flooring we needed to protect until dry in and to protect after even. Obviously, it's really heavy, so you either need a lull or on site or a boom truck to have it delivered. And we heard from Mike Gerton, he does a similar thing, which it makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know what EPDM membrane costs, but boy, it's bulletproof.
I remember when Mike was doing that deck drainage webinar last year, he was talking about, it costs less than a dollar a square foot, and that's for the heavy stuff. So, I mean, you can probably get the thinner stuff for way less. But I don't know if that's the case this year with all the price hikes. But the thing about EPDM, I think that's great, is that like tarps are not totally waterproof. Like they're, I guess when they're brand new they are, but not for very long.
If water's sitting on it, it does start to go through, right?
Yeah.
And they get beat up fast, and I think the sun takes a toll on them pretty quickly. Once you've had it out in the sun for a few days, then you catch it on a nail or a corner, all of a sudden you've got a big tear in it. So I like that idea. I mean, it doesn't seem nearly as manageable EPDM as a tarp, just in terms of like rolling it up and weight and all that stuff.
Oh, it's heavy. Yeah.
But you'll use it for a long time, that's for sure.
It's meant to be out in the weather for 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah.
I've got a scrap of it that's like 5x5 that came off of some commercial roof job that I just happened to be near about 25 years ago, and I use it as the cover for the electric cement mixer that I keep outdoors. And it's great because it's heavy. You don't even have to tie it down.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. So there you go, folks. That's all you need to know about tarping. This comes from Brian. Hi, all, from sunny Boise, Idaho. I just wanted to give a quick suggestion to the listener who asked, how can I build a durable mini skate ramp on a tight budget in episode 360? There's a product common to the sign trade called expanded PVC. Sintra is the brand name I'm familiar with. It works well for this application. We've used it on ramps for BMX biking, so I'm pretty sure his skateboard ramp would be a piece of cake. Any technical data sheets will say that it's not for long-term exposure, but we've used it on signs that have spent upwards of 10 years uncovered with only mild effect. The price is right, anywhere from $15 to $30 a sheet, depending on the thickness. The only caveat is it tends to expand and contract about a 1/4 inch over 8 feet, depending on the temperature. This web link has specifics. Skate or die!
Okay. I've actually used that stuff before when I worked in the set construction business in the cabinet shop. And
does it look like corrugated cardboard, Rod? Is that what I'm thinking?
No. It's basically just like the PVC trim boards that we use, like the white, like AZEC trim boards, but denser, and it usually comes in like 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch thick sheets. I'm sure you can get it in other thicknesses too, but we always had 1/8 and 1/4 inch sheets lying around, and we'd make our wall panels, like we'd face like temporary wall panels out of it, and it's really easy to cut and work with.
Does it come in cool colors like Van sneakers?
You can get it in any finish you want. It can be matte, gloss, colored. You probably even get it in, it's all kinds of stuff.
Cool. I love that our listeners help us out with important questions such as these. Hi, guys. I'm sure you've seen a plethora of these articles, but I thought of you all and figured I'd say hello. I hope you're doing well. The podcast and all the content / discussing in the community continues to be exciting amidst my tech work. Have an awesome week. I am so thrilled and thankful you guys are fighting the good high-performance home moisture management air sealing fight. Mikee. Mikee is our friend from California, right, Rob?
Yeah. Last time we saw him was 2 years ago at the Builder Show in Vegas. He drove out to see us.
Mikee, I don't know why you put tech work in quotation marks, but I'm kind of curious what you really do. What do you guys think? Does he work for the CIA? I thought he might be like a private investigator like Jim Rockford. Who knows? But anyway, he sent us a web link to a Bloomberg.com article dated June 11th. It says lumber futures posted their biggest ever weekly loss, extending a tumble from all-time highs reached last month as sawmills ramp up output and buyers hold off on purchases. Prices in Chicago fell 18% this week, the biggest decline for most active futures in records going back to 1986. Lumber has now dropped almost 40% from the record high reached on May 10. Sawmills appear to be catching up with rampant home building demand in North America that fueled a months-long rally, bringing some relief to a market beset by supply shortages and price surges. Buyers are balking at still historically elevated prices and awaiting additional supplies, setting off a cascading sell-off, analysts said. Activity yesterday was brisk to start, turned lethargic, and ended quite subdued. William Giger, who buys and sells eastern spruce for mills for Sherwood Lumber in Massachusetts, said in a note Friday, "There was plenty of lumber available from the mills and enough ambition to sell. Missing was a sense of urgency from buyers." What do you guys think? I haven't seen any evidence of prices dropping 40%.
Patrick, when was that article dated?
June 11.
And that's about and I'm completely ignorant when it comes to commodities trading, but that's about lumber futures, right? And the commodity trading that's happening in real time. So I think that would imply that the prices for purchase prices wouldn't catch up for a little bit, right?
You think they'd have to probably work through the stock that's already in the stores at least, right?
I guess. I don't know. Like you, I don't know anything about lumber futures.
I don't know.
But it seems like
good. I think it's good news for those those trying to build or people trying to build or remodel their homes and contractors trying to get this work done. One of the things that I don't remember us talking about or one of the effects of all this that I don't remember us talking about, but a few people few contractors have mentioned to me is that their suppliers from not only lumber yards, but also like electrical store supplies and plumbing supplies, they're only guaranteeing their prices for 24 hours. So you can't put out, you can't put out a bid, and give your client a few days to accept that bid. It's like, it has to be that immediate, or you have to go back and check on prices again.
24 hours? Really? I had not heard that.
Yeah, it was either last week or the week before, I got a text from Justin Fink, and he said, he said, "This is nuts." He said, and I think he might have even mentioned, this doesn't jive with the work that he's doing. I almost want to say he mentioned someone who was doing some well work for him, but maybe I'm mistaking that. Maybe it was his plumber, but or plumbing supply. But yeah, and he said, "How did we work under these conditions?"
That's crazy.
So not only the prices, but that inability to count on them.
Yeah.
Diami was telling me that, oftentimes it takes folks who own commercial buildings or, a hospital or a church a long time to decide that they want to proceed with a roof replacement because it's expensive and there are a lot of decision makers, right? And he said by the time they make the choice to pull the trigger, he has to requote the job because the prices are good for, in his case, I think he said 30 days.
So I wonder if all these builders are having to put clauses in their contracts, change the wording of their contracts, I'm sure, if they're smart.
One of his suppliers had a seminar for their clients, and his takeaway message was that make sure you write your contracts so you can get out of them. Otherwise, you might be buying material at a loss, right? Because if you have to honor this contract you gave someone, weeks or months ago, there's no way that stuff's going to be the same price when you go to place the order.
Right, and on like new builds, for example, it can be quite a while between the contract and the beginning of the build.
A year or more, right?
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of funny that, I don't know if you heard the whistle blowing in the background, but while you were talking about mills buying in Massachusetts, the freight train full of lumber rolled right past my window.
My brother-in-law, who's doing that remodel that I mentioned before, he's actually was a remodeling contractor for many years, but for the last 5 years or so, he kind of went back to work for and is working with his brother in a family business. So he's gotten away from remodeling, and he started this project on his own house recently. He said, "This is nuts." He said, "I have to work 2 hours at my job to buy 3 2x4s."
That's why people are saving 6-inch square pieces of plywood, right? And Oh, this is a good question from our listener, Corey. Apologies if this question has been answered before. I live in a 70s era split level, 1,200 square foot house just outside of Chicago with a forced air heating system. The finished basement / low level is consistently much, much colder than the ground level and second floor. Is there an easy, inexpensive way to better distribute the conditioned air? Right now, if we get the bedroom upstairs to a comfortable temperature, the basement becomes a walk-in freezer. I've read that closing the vents can cause unwanted stress to the system. The issue has been cooling the house in the summer, he went on to tell me when I asked him later, because I wasn't sure if he was talking about was the basement cold in the winter or cold in the summer when he's trying to air condition. So he says the issue has been cooling the house this summer. We just purchased it. It's the first home for my wife and I this April, so I've yet to experience a heating season. Air handlers in the laundry / utility room in the finished basement. The ductwork seems to run on the floor between the basement and the upper level. I also asked him if he'd had anyone out to look at his HVAC system or if he had a blower door test, and he's not done either. I've attached the floor plan if that helps. Happy to share photos, but not sure of what would be helpful. Also, it might be important to know that the entire HVAC system is 15 plus years old. Perhaps another way to ask this question is there a way to manipulate my air handler to throw more cold air upstairs and less downstairs? Can we simply close the vents in the basement? Or maybe I'm totally missing something. I am a new homeowner. No, you're not missing something at all, Corey. That's one way to go. The risk is that if you don't have enough airflow over the cooling coil, it's going to freeze up and not work and potentially be damaged. So you have to be judicious with how you close things. And unfortunately, most registers, I learned this from Mark Jassome, who's an HVAC engineer who I had an interview earlier in the week with. Most registers, you have to close them 90% to get a 50% reduction in airflow. And the downside of that is it gets incredibly noisy because all this air is trying to get through this little tiny space. So if you have your TV room in the basement or whatever, all you're going to hear is like air rushing when the heating or air conditioning system is running.
Now, I looked at the pictures of the house. I didn't see the floor plan that you were talking about, but so he's got a sort of a shallow hip roof over the upper level, and I'm guessing, hopefully, that there's a hatch to get up there. And I'm just wondering if air sealing and some blown-in insulation could go a long way to solving this problem. I know my brother has this big vaulted ceiling in this big room on the top of his house that he just can't keep cool compared to the rest of the house. So if your HVAC system is running all the time just to keep that upper level cool, that's going to
And there's much less load in the basement, right? Because it's insulated by the soil. And
for sure.
And the delta T between the basement and the main living space is way less than it is between the upper level and the attic temperature, right?
Yeah. Did you notice from his pictures or floor plan that he gave you in addition to what you showed us?
You think I'm keeping things from you? I'm not,
yeah,
Rob.
a typical split level where it's like very open, where you've got the heat just rises right up those staircases.
I think some blower door directed air sealing is going to be the way to go, right? So you need to have someone out there, Corey, to blower door test your house. And if you can find someone who can evaluate the HVAC system, that's often the same person, have them scope it out. And I think you need to know where you're starting from to know what the right thing to do is.
I tried to poke go ahead.
I was just going to say that makes, even if there is HVAC work that needs to be done, you want to get that kind of envelope work done first, so that you're doing the appropriate work, and those load calcs that a good HVAC contractor will do in a place like that to make decisions on the best path forward, should be done based on first upgrading the envelope and just making the house tighter, better insulated, and that's really cost effective work. And it doesn't matter if you balance out. You can balance out the temperatures. Find a way to balance out the temperatures in those rooms, and you can still have a really inefficient house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can tell you what the HVAC contractor is going to say when you call them up for your comfort complaint, and they're going to tell you need an air handler in the attic, right? And you're going to need more ducts up there, and you're going to have to treat it as a separate zone. But I don't think that's the right approach.
No, and honestly, if you're looking at lower cost and you don't have enough ductwork or capacity for upstairs, like the more affordable thing might be to do a single zone mini split as a supplemental cooling for the upstairs. But like you said, that's something to do down the road
Yeah.
after you deal with the envelope. And I did look at the state of Illinois' like energy efficiency website. They don't seem to have like a subsidized or organized energy audit program like Connecticut and New York do, but they do have at least links on a state website that sort of give you recommendations for getting an energy audit done. So you probably have to just sort of search on your own or go to like ResNet and find or BPI and search for like certified energy auditors in your area.
Corey, you asked for the cheap fix. I would at least try sealing your basement ductwork, or in the ductwork in the mechanical / utility room, to try and force more air to the rest of the house. I think that's a good, inexpensive first step, and it can't hurt. What do you guys think? Is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you'd be surprised that you find a really big leak somewhere in the duct system. You just never know.
Yeah, and the other thing that could be happening is it's, a disconnected duct up in the attic. If you do have distribution ducts up in the attic and they're flex duct, which seems possible, it's quite often that they come off their, ceiling register, and it's just blowing the cold air up in the attic, not doing you any good.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll even find really weird things too. Like a friend of mine had a basement heating duct that was just pouring into the dirt floored crawl space underneath his bathroom to prevent pipes from freezing from the previous owner. So it's you just really never know if you're not the person who put the system in yourself. Sometimes you'll find really simple fixes to problems you didn't even know existed.
Corey, if you want, go ahead.
I was just gonna Rob made me think of like some of the clever solutions I've seen to people solving freezing pipe problems over the years. And one of them, and I won't say who it was at the risk of embarrassing him, because he's well known to our audience, but
come on, you have to tell us.
A friend who put some plumbing in an exterior wall that kept freezing up just simply took the drywall down and exposed the pipe. So exposed the pipe so that it was no longer insulated and kept from the heat in the room. And it's been like that for about a decade.
Part of me says that works. What's wrong with that,
does,
right?
Yeah.
And if you don't like how it looks, you can go get that that screening that they used to put over the old radiator covers and just tack that up over the opening, right?
Modern art, right? This comes from Jack. Hey, Corey, a final thought. If you want to send us a smartphone video of your ducts, that would be fine. We could maybe give a better diagnosis, but I think you're going to want to get someone out there to do a blower door test and do an energy audit on your house, because my guess is the kind of house you have often have some really big thermal bypasses, and oftentimes it's pretty easy to really improve their performance. This comes from Jack. Hello, team. As it is deck season up north in Minneapolis again, I have a question regarding ledgers and how to properly fasten / flash them. I know this is a topic which there is a ton of information on, but oddly enough, I have not found much information on how to do so in my specific situation. I'm looking to add square footage to an existing deck in a house with stucco siding, and in turn need an additional ledger. The existing ledger is present in the siding and appears to have been properly flashed when the house had its stucco applied. However, now that I want to add an additional ledger to the house where the stucco is already present, how do I flash it properly? I know the rim joist behind the wall is solid and will provide a strong ledger bolt connection, but I'm curious as to the proper way to apply flashing. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Jack wrote me, Patrick, one last thing. I should note that I'm hesitant to go the freestanding deck route, as the beams and posts necessary would obstruct a basement window. You can see it in the photograph. Which brings me to issues of egress compliance. Of course, if I have to go this route, I can do some playing with the beam sizing and post locations, but would rather just avoid risking blocking the window too much. Wow, what do you guys think? Stucco is probably the hardest thing to put a ledger on, right? Brick veneer, stucco, these are all problem materials.
Yeah, in our deck guide that we put together this past year, we've got a couple of options mentioned there. Mike Gerton's kind of gone into this a few times, and in one of his videos, he featured some Simpson hardware that's kind of unique in the way it's sort of a bracket that has a post that bears off of. You have to make a hole. It bears off of the rim joist inside, and then it has these diagonal screws that go up into the rim joist at an angle to basically sort of hang you've got these sort of 2 points where it's hanging off of the rim joist through the masonry.
Isn't this more for brick, Rob? Can you use it with stucco?
It says you can use it with anything that's over an exterior. Like he shows it for exterior foam. So it involves only drilling a couple of small holes. If you want to go a little bit more substantial, there's something that we're going to be featuring in spec called the deck, and then STRUC, and it's
You're finally using that lead I gave you.
Yeah. No, we followed up on that. But it's very similar to those main deck brackets where it's just like a piece of like an I-beam almost. But the difference is that it's not just a bracket that goes on the outside. It has another piece that goes inside in between the joist bays that is the actual structural connection to the framing. And then it bolts through the rim joists to this very robust system that's on the inside. And I think you have to put them like every 5 or 6 feet or something like that.
It depends on the depth. It depends on
it. You got to look at your load and
he's in Minneapolis. That product comes from a warmer climate that doesn't have the snow loading that Minneapolis does, I'm sure. So
yeah, they have details on their website about the layout, and I think you can work with them to get the correct sizing. But so the nice thing about that, as opposed to a full ledger, I mean, you could, I guess, if you really wanted to, cut out the stucco in the area where the ledger is going to go and treat it almost like a window opening and flash it. So we have a little Z flashing going over the stucco below, the same way that you would flash a deck ledger itself, on a house where you tuck it up underneath the side.
The difficulty, though, is that, stucco is probably attached to expanded metal lath, which is nailed like every few inches, right? So getting that flashing up there could be a challenge.
Sure. And that's, like I said, the most invasive route to go. But so, I mean, I would probably go with one of these bracket systems because it's going to be a heck of a lot easier than.
What do you think, Brian?
Well, I don't know, other than the two systems that Rob just pointed out, and he said he doesn't want to build a freestanding deck, which seems to solve a lot of problems,
especially with stucco siding, right?
Yeah, especially with stucco side and with exterior foam insulated houses, and the freestanding deck idea seems to have become more and more appealing over the years,
especially with the advent of helical piers, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah, for sure. They are a great problem solver, and you call the company, and then you'll be building your deck that afternoon.
Yeah.
And can you run a helical pier all the way up, like several feet out of the ground? You can, right? So
yes,
you would have you could have a very slender metal pole that wouldn't be as much of a visual obstruction as a big heavy wooden post. Might be a little bit less obtrusive.
So I told Jack that I was a little worried about his existing ledger. Well, just looked to me like it was pulling off the house. So, I think at a minimum he's got to make sure that sound back there, right? If they didn't flash that ledger correctly, that thing could have been rotting for decades, and you don't know what you got. So I would definitely make sure the existing deck is safe before I started going and adding on to it, because it might be easier to build an entirely new deck that is the width you want instead of adding to this one. Although with the price of pressure-treated lumber, I certainly understand why you'd want to keep what's there.
Yeah, there's so many recommendations that sort of have gone out the window this year, because it seems like the common opinion is that it's usually easier to just replace a deck than to reuse an old frame because of the not knowing how sound some of the connections are, especially hidden.
We published an article a number of years ago now, but it was Rick Arnold, and he pulled a deck frame away from a house and retrofit a proper ledger and put it back. And this was big deck, and he had a really slick process for it. And it seemed like, considering the time and money involved in taking an existing deck down and building a new one, if the frame outside of the ledger, if the frame is in good shape, it seemed like a viable approach to me.
Mm.
For sure, especially if it's something you're doing yourself. Because obviously you're willing. I think most people are willing to put in a little bit more of their own time if they're not paying for some labor.
The only thing I would say in response to that, Brian, is the best part of building a deck is building the frame, and it you don't get that if you get to reuse it. Well, Jack, I hope that's helpful. Boy, make sure that your existing deck is safe, because that's bad when those things fall off. Okay, this is from Chris. Hello, all. Was wondering what you all would do in my situation. I'm renovating my upstairs on my 2-story home, and I'm approaching the drywall stage. But before I hang my drywall, I'd like to address a considerable sag that I have right in the middle of our home. Our framing in the basement is quite cut up due to an old heating unit that had been removed even before I moved in. The floor joists are true 2x8, 24 inches on center with an 11-foot span. I'm thinking it's pretty underbuilt. I was going to start sistering on joists and would like to use 2x8 dimensional lumber, but at the current spans, would that be enough? But that's not the worst of it. The sag in the middle is most definitely coming from the fact that they cut in the old HVAC unit directly under my load-bearing wall, and what I'm left with, I'll send along in pictures. I've begun slowly raising the sag with Jackson posts, very slowly, but was wondering what I should do when I finally reach a good point of level. The basement is mostly storage and laundry, with no plans to make anything more, but I'd like to not just put posts at every location and make it a maze to get to our laundry. Also, pay no mind to the electrical down there. I know it's terrible, and I'm working on it. Chris, fix that wiring, would you? What do you guys think? Did you see this disaster? Who the heck would do this to someone's house?
A lot of people.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So who wants to explain what's going on here?
I don't know. You explain it, Patrick. No, he's got some big old holes where there used to be joists that they cut in and kind of cobbled in some 2x to sort of, where I guess there must have been a register there at some point.
Yeah, it looks like a gravity furnace, right? It's like, it's just a big old heating plant in the basement with a huge grill cut into the floor that heats the entire house theoretically, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, that's not a good thing to put underneath your load-bearing wall.
Right? I don't even know, how did that work? I guess it was to have register on both sides of that wall?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I can't see that far.
Yeah, but my guess is that the bearing wall was bearing on the heating plant at one time.
Well, I'll say, he's jacking it up with posts. He's got some pipes and the screw jack columns and little bottle jack. So he's getting the thing up level. I don't know if I would feel on that kind of a span that sistering alone would be enough. I know he doesn't want to put posts in everywhere, but I kind of feel like there's probably a few select locations he's going to want to keep some lolly columns or something. But we've talked about this a few times on the podcast, and I don't know if we brought this up, but Mike Gerton was part of an article, issue 184, 6 ways to stiffen a bouncy floor. And I know we've talked about a bunch of these ways, everything from just sistering a solid lumber to plywood, both situations where you would use construction adhesive to and nails or structural screws. And but the one that Mike said was really surprisingly effective was diagonal strapping that kind of goes from one top end of the joist down one side diagonally to the middle, then wraps up under and then diagonally up to the other side, because you're sort of making a truss. Yeah, metal strapping. You're sort of making a truss when you're doing that.
That's wacky.
I don't know. But you know what? But here's the thing. While I was looking at this stuff last night before getting ready for the podcast, you've seen pictures of my basement. It's kind of similar. I don't have any load-bearing walls that have been cut, but bouncy joist that my family complains about all the time. And I'm kind of thinking, I've got multiple space in the house that have these bouncy joists. I feel like I should take every method that Mike laid out in that article and do it in a different portion of my basement. Because we make these recommendations, but we've never actually seen these houses done this way. So
I think that is a great idea, Rob. I would even consent to help you do that, to have your floor stiffening lab.
Okay. Will you bring your camera, photograph it for me?
Oh yeah, man. We're going the whole 9 yards. What do you think about this, Brian?
Well, I think that I don't want to give advice on sistering on his question about what size lumber he needs to sister, because I think, when you're working with something existing and you're planning on that being part of the support, you need more expertise than I have to tell you what you need to give it the strength that is required there. And I also think there's more that you need to know about the building to know what you actually need. So it's not just the span, but it's what the existing material is and what the loads are. Just another thing that he mentions putting in posts, and that just want to point out the putting in posts arbitrarily. Also, again, you need to know about loads and spacing and where those posts should be, and you're going to need footings underneath those posts.
Mm-hmm.
So for those posts to actually to not run into this sagging floor situation again, or cracked slab or whatever might come from that, wherever those posts end up being, you're going to need to cut out the slab and pour a footing.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. What were you going to say, Rob?
I'll say that's you have to think about that, because the thing is, it's not even just how much of a load there is on the entire floor system. It's like point loads, whether there's more load on one side than another. I worked on a staircase one time where it was a 19th century, 18th century house where a huge floorboard was popping up over near the top of the stairs. And we were thinking that something had sagged. But what had happened was they had cut the end of a big heavy joist on the other end of the house. And now that joist was cantilevering off of a beam and lifting this part of the staircase.
It was like a big seesaw.
I was trying to lag bolt the board back down, and it would not budge, because there was a huge portion of the house acting like a lever, lifting it up. So if you put a point load on a beam and there's more weight on one side than the other, it might actually lift a portion of the floor instead of just support the whole thing.
Jeff, do you have any thoughts about this?
Well, one of the things that caught my eye was that even though these are 2x8 joists, they're notched at the end, so they're not really 2x8.
On the beam end, on the center girder,
right?
Guys, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like there is missing like center girder in this floor system, right? For at least part of it, and I think you got to fix that first and then work on stiffening the floor. And the thing that Brian was talking about, where you just can't arbitrarily put posts and you have to also have footings with them, is excellent advice. The thing I would add to that is, most good lumber yards have someone on staff who's really good at sizing engineered lumber products, specifically LVL and laminated strand lumber, these kind of things that can be very helpful in making a beam. And if you give them some details about how your house is constructed and pay attention to point loads, they can often be very helpful in sizing a beam and telling you where to put posts.
Yeah, and actually, I think some of the LVL manufacturers provide them with like serious materials and services to do that. So,
the software is very sophisticated. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of your first option before actually hiring an engineer to come in.
Chris sent us a photo of what you do. I'm curious. This comes from Andrew. Once again, this is Andrew, who's the builder in Asheville. He says, "Hi guys, I'm working on a remodel of a fairly new log home. The building is a 2x8 stick frame first floor with log siding and a square log second floor. When I opened up the wall on the stick framing portion of the home, I noticed some musty smells and what looked like water damage around the window opening. While I haven't pulled all the trim from around the window on the exterior, it looks to me like the only waterproofing that was done was some L-shaped flashing behind the head casing, and generous caulking. This level is pretty straightforward to fix depending on how in-depth the customers want to get with removing siding, sheathing, and reinstalling the windows. I'm also replacing a window on the second floor where the wall is solid log. This area has the same water intrusion around the window and some damp wood. I'm not really sure what to do to try and waterproof this opening since it's, well, a solid log. So far, my best idea is to use a power plane to slope the bottom of the opening, liquid flash it, make a saw curve from the log above the window opening to accept Z flashing above the window, zip tape the sides and top of the nailing flange, and reinstall casing. I realized I only have one picture of the window I'll be replacing. So he did send that along. So what do you guys think? I mean, like, how the heck do you waterproof a log wall?
It sounds like he's got a pretty good plan in place there. I did some poking around, and even a lot of the log companies or people who build log houses don't seem to have very good
details. Fudge this, right? They fudge this.
It usually involves a lot of sealant.
Yeah.
And I guess, if really in a pinch, getting a super high quality sealant is maybe part of the solution, but it sounds like cutting in some flashing is not a bad idea. And sloping the sill for sure. I don't know. You're quiet, Patrick.
I'm trying to bite my tongue, and it's not Andrew's fault that his clients have a dumb house, right? Like, what the heck? I don't understand these things, but
it's that material that's so problematic, right? Because if it was like a block wall or something, it's like you'd be stuck with the same situation, but you wouldn't have a water sensitive material,
right?
Or a material that moves with the seasons,
right?
So I did some digging, and one of my favorite companies for sealants is Stashco. They just make really good stuff in my experience. What's that like super flexible caulking they have, Brian?
The Big Stretch.
Big Stretch, which is amazing.
It's great. Yeah.
I fixed more of my bad carpentry with Big Stretch. So anyway, they make a line of products for log homes too. And honestly, I mean, I would look to them for the methods, but it seems to me like the go-to thing for window detailing is foam backer rod and the right thickness of sealant. And they make no bones about that you have to tool this stuff. Like, it's because the gaps are huge. They can be, an inch or 3/4 of an inch around a window. And they probably should be because the logs move, right? Not in length, but certainly up and down, at least while the house is drying out.
I would imagine on this house, since it has board siding on the bottom and solid logs on the top, that maybe the transition between those two levels is something that should be looked at too, because who knows? I'm sure there's just chinking or caulking or something in there. There's probably no flashing in there, because what are you going to flash to?
The part I don't really understand is why stud walls with log siding and then logs on top. Can you imagine? Like, that's why they have to be 2x8s, because the thing weighs a gazillion pounds.
Yeah, I was wondering that myself.
Mechanicals or wiring they needed to fit in there, or maybe it's a hillside, walkout basement, and they just framed in the side that was walkout. I don't know.
I'm kind of speechless because I don't really know what to ever say about log homes except that don't buy one or build one.
I like the idea of kerfing and the flashing a lot. That seems smart.
I agree.
At the top of the window.
And the liquid flash on the bottom, right? Because that is the only way to keep, this water going and to make it waterproof. It's like, you're in essence making a shower pan.
Yeah, anything you can do to get gravity on your side is good.
What do you guys think of log homes? Let's go around. Jeff, we'll start with you.
Well, I've said it before. It's like for a seasonal house, great. For full time, forget about it.
Brian?
My romantic side would love to live in a log home with a wood stove in the middle of the woods and, take monthly trips to the grocery store. But my practical side would never build a log home.
Because of the, energy performance, the maintenance, the aesthetic, the expense, I could go on.
Keep going. Yes. No, the aesthetic can be. I certainly think the aesthetic can be charming. You know, and I mean, I don't think we should spend too much time getting into our personal opinions, but I mean, the aesthetic can also be, to me, like, you know, kind of when people try to do, you know, these egregiously big log homes, that kind of loses its charm. It just, but you know, a small, you know, an actual cabin, log cabin can be charming aesthetic when done well, for sure.
Rob, you know, what about you?
Well, I mean, I would like the idea of having a little cabin in the woods as like a place to go hang out. I wouldn't build a log house myself, but if I did have to build a log house, it would have very big overhangs, like, you know, big porches under the gable ends and, you know, 3-foot overhangs on the sides, because I mean, that would kind of go with the scale of it anyway, have big exposed log rafter tails, so that at least you've got the roof helping you a lot to deal with the moisture issues.
I hope you would say the same thing about any home. Big overhangs.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure.
If you don't want your windows and doors to leak, start with big overhangs.
Yeah. Build a simple roof, no roof penetrations, and big overhangs, and you almost don't even have to worry about flashing your windows.
It's funny, you know, you hear this so universally. I was interviewing Peter Pfeiffer for a Pro Talk recently, and he has a couple rental properties, and he says their maintenance is directly related to the size of the overhang, which I think is really kind of interesting. And it's you know, it's helpful in all climates. In hot places, it helps keep the house cool. In wet places, it helps keep it dry. You know, snowy places, it keeps it dry. Well, before we go, we should talk about the FHB anniversary podcast. We've done 2 now, and it's definitely time for another. So I'm going to appeal to our listeners to send us an email describing who you would like to interview or who you would like interviewed and who you would like to do it, and we will try our best to accommodate that. This was your idea, right, Brian?
Yeah.
And what was the motivation for this? I'm sure it was to get me off the air. We were brainstorming ideas to celebrate our anniversary, and you know, we have had so many just excellent contributors over the years, and we have such an excellent audience of this podcast. I mean, just the quality of the feedback and the questions that we get, that it just felt like it might be fun to put. I'd like to keep doing it. I mean, I think we should keep doing it after our anniversary. Let's, keep putting people together who would like to interview, their favorite author or an expert in some subject matter, or, anyone really, as long as it's relevant to what what this podcast is about. It's a fun idea, and they've been informative shows. Yeah. And I love the fresh perspective, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Patrick needs a break once in a while, everyone. Let's give Patrick a break.
Rob, who would you interview?
Who would I interview? Put me on the spot. Oh.
Jeff and Brian, you can be thinking about while Rob stumbles around here.
No, maybe go to Jeff first. Let me think about it.
That was pretty suave, Rob. Anybody?
There's just so many. There's so many good contributors we've had over the years that I don't know if I could pick just one.
I think I'd like to hear from Myron, because he's just such a nice person and he's got a great story.
I think I want to interview Ben Bogey, because Ben, I've never met anybody who puts as much thought into how he puts things together. And I only get that in little dribs and drabs from the videos that he's been doing for us lately. And I'd love to even just spend a day on a job site with him.
I bet he would let you do that.
Yeah. Free labor.
He's going to put you to work with doing some air sealing or something, is my guess.
Yeah.
How about you, Jeff?
What about Mike Lancaster?
Okay. Who's that?
Maybe I got the name wrong. The renovation.
Oh, Litchfield.
Litchfield.
Yes. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Have you thought of someone
One
yet,
of
Brian?
those towns.
I maybe there's a couple of architects that I think would be fascinating to talk to. Obi Bowman and Mark Hutker. They've both written for Fine Homebuilding over the years, and they're sort of, there are these architects that that there's really a sense of vision and artistry, in their work. I think Obi Bowman's a fascinating architect and has there's like this structural element to everything that he designs that is kind of impressive. And
You mean
and so
the things that hold the house up?
Yes,
He makes that
yes.
part of the design?
Yes, in very big, expressive ways, and I'd love to learn, more about that. And another person who I've been, people are, more familiar with, listeners will be more familiar with, but another person I think I'd like to hear from soon, and I think we're going to have him in an FHB interview in the magazine soon. Is Gary Katz? Gary's, he's done, in last few years he's done less and less with the magazine. In fact, I think it's probably been 5 years now since we had him in. But he's been in this industry for so long, and not only as a production finish carpenter, but also as a presenter, and maybe one of the most unique perspectives, because when Gary started his roadshow, he literally traveled the country all year long, talking to builders at lumber yards and at trade shows and conferences in just about every location. And I just think he's probably, by this point, like, we've heard about his methods a lot over the years, but now I'd really interested to hear about from his perspective. Like, what has he seen? What's changed? What's evolved? What is he fond of? Where does he think we're going wrong? And I know his things trim carpentry and finish carpentry, but still that's a big part of what we do in this industry. It's not as much as what gets discussed these days, but it's definitely a big part of building a house.
What I appreciate so much about Gary is his methods are so practical. Carpenters and contractors generally, there's always some problem. And, if you can give folks an easy way to get stuff done that looks fantastic, that is a huge benefit, because now they have methods that they don't have to worry about, and they can focus on some other, difficult aspect of the craft.
Right, for sure.
Well, if any of you folks want to hear from those folks, please let us know. We will put you in touch with them, and I'd love to hear it. It'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Do you guys have anything you want to add before we part company? Any updates with the company or things we're doing here that folks should know about?
No, but I would like to put a call out to, I'm working on an article on clamps. I want to sort of do a comprehensive look at all the different types of clamps that builders use. And, there's the standard ones that everybody knows, but I've, in my searches recently, discovered some new ones that I'd never seen before. And so I don't know, people could email in and tell us about your favorite clamp, or some oddball clamp, or some method you figured out how to do something easier using clamps. Because I tell you, clamps and jigs, like when I worked in a cabinet shop, you just can't live without them. I mean, it's just so satisfying to create a solution for getting a job done that you would normally need like 3 or 4 hands to do, or it's just impossible to do without. It's like sometimes you spend more time building jigs to put things together, and clamps are usually a big part of that.
Yeah, it might be the best clamp tip is to have a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
Because as soon as you need a lot of them, you need a lot of them. You're probably not going to find a way to do that thing without a lot of them.
Exactly.
Boy, I found that is one thing that cheaping out is a endless frustration. Like, spend some money on good clamps, you'll have them forever. Don't buy cheap ones, because they'll just be frustrating.
And so many of them are made for very specific reasons, specific use cases, and have features that match that. Like the fact that some of those big parallel clamps, the ends of them are in line with each other, so that if you're gluing a door or a panel up and you're resting it on your workbench, it just sits nice and flat, Yeah. And some of the hand operated clamps that we've only had for a couple of decades, they just make assembly so much easier.
You're talking the quick grip style, Rob?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are life changing. They're amazing. Jeff, you have anything?
Nope.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Rob, Brian, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us. However you're listening, it helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Happy building. Keep craft alive.